ask a question. What on earth, or in reality, could be so incredibly important that an entire globe of people think that a tomb is worth a global effort with 100% of your effort in mind? That's what it would require to build the Pyramid of Giza with our technology today. And even with that, it's not going to happen in 20 years. But if this is something that's brought to the people entirely, and they realize beyond any reasonable doubt that they can be immortal, and they are immortal, but they can have some degree of control over the currents when their spirit travels the sea of stars in the sky. If we could see the gravity, we'd probably see a funnel that goes all the way up to the sky, a funnel that meets it. If it was water, it might spread out like a disc where the two meet and collide because of the gravity. Then it spreads out like a disc. Information. Interesting stuff. But what we're going to do is visualize alignments and something that we can't see as a conduit for sending thoughts and information across the stars, as well as your essence and genetic code. Some experiments about genetic teleportation, phantom DNA. It starts to look exactly like what we're about to see. Here's our sun. Here is another sun. It might not be the sun you want to go to, but if you're talking about sending data through it as a conduit, it can be stored there until it makes this link with another one that's along the path that you want to go to. And they align all of these different stars, and it seems that you have to go through each one of them, and those would be the Book of the Dead tribulations that you're dealing with. And not all of them, not just the Book of the Dead. I think a lot of the tribulations of Limbo, Purgatory, and Shibaba are the times when this conduit isn't open because there's alignment. If there are alignments, they're not places you want to go. And then, if you talk about after death experiences, you might be talking about going to a bright white door that opens that you may perceive in the other ether of whatever spiritual realm is, or mind, being a visual representation of this thing the ancients said was a conduit. But the shape of heaviness, and aligning that with another group of infinitely large, heavy devices out in the sea of stars. This definitely could be used as a conduit when you realize that they've now coincidentally got 1 + 1 = 2. They claim during alignments only as a conduit to the object of the world on the other side of this conduit, of this alignment. They claim to be interstellar via this technology. They claim this temple technology is interstellar. It gives them the ability, after death, to project their spirit and their genetic code and memories across the stars during alignment. It's almost as if they knew that these stars and this conduit had something to do with weight. Interestingly enough, the temples they would build would be designed as if harvesting the heaviest potential material that they would then shape and align with these alignments, these big, heavier stars. Giza is literally the minute hand on our biggest, heaviest device. And so, they claim to unlock the ability to control where you go. Just really interesting. They say that information is sent during these alignments. That's another implication about science. If you have a satellite, you have to have satellites aligned to send a radio signal directly to and fro. This would be gravity, so you definitely, they're saying gravity is the conduit for the soul and mind. And in some cases, they talk about sending physical shit over there. But you have a pyramid here, it's aligned with this world here, and this sun over here. Now let's draw another map of the world over here on this star, say. This is that world, aligned with this whole thing. And it's receiving information. We also know what it's like in the same temple building historical technology to receive and use information to resurrect the dead. When they want to bring back the soul of, say, Osiris, his sister has a child, and in that child would be the spirit, but that child would be born under this alignment during a ritual. So what they would do is they come over here. Here's their world, and here's their coal, and their heavy freaking material, and their pyramid. And then here's our sun. Oops. Ah! I hate this program. Here's our sun. And they're aligned. Open conduit. This is basically the full representation. Here's their world. On their world, they have a pyramid. Now they're receiving the signal. And this is the signal of somebody who wants to go home now and be reborn on their home world. Or let's say vice versa. Let's say Osiris died and he went home to be reborn on his home world in Sirius. And then he dies over there and wishes to be reincarnated over here. So what happens is, in this vortex, the most important thing, building the most complex, the most amount of effort that humanity has ever put into anything, if it was humans, is also a tune. And it's a scientific device and an education puzzle box, educator, teacher of the great philosophers and mathematicians and what have you. But it also functions as not just a tomb, it's a boat across the Great River, the other side of the Milky Way. And it will ferry you across that river, but it's a pain in the butt. It's taxing for you to take this ride. So in any event, they put definitely 100,000% they felt that preserving the genetic code had something to do with what information does go through this conduit. Now, it naturally would happen, but naturally there's thousands of these conduits that open, and you could die anytime, and after your death they're just open and open and open and close and open and close and open and close, and it's probably pretty shitty to stick around if you listen to the stories about limbo, purgatory, underworld, all this stuff. Pretty much people just want to rush right into them, sure. These motherfuckers built the paddle so you could steer and figure out which one of these conduits you want to take. And that involved, after your death, preserving the DNA, putting it in this vortex that only aligned with the light and the gravity of the destination. And it would be heavy, dense material in a chamber of acoustics, which is exactly how they do shadow phantom DNA teleportation, seemingly, where it imprints its code on something that's non-local. Now, interestingly enough, that looks exactly like it's a replication of the ancient Stargate technology. We're not talking the movie where it opens up this big tunnel you can see. You don't see this when the full moon does this, but sucks a bubble in the ocean like here's high tide. It doesn't make a full funnel. The ocean doesn't go up to the sky and connect with the moon. But if it did, if it was just strong enough with two equal force planets where the water met and just did something like that, it'd probably spread out right in the middle like that because it wouldn't have anywhere else to go. The impact would cause it to just make a disk, like a galaxy. But that's just my guess. But so they're saying your soul can go through this conduit, but the way they have rigged and manipulated technology to control this is they sing to you when the conduit's open. When you hear the music, go in that door and remember these chants because they'll help you remember what you're going to face on your ride home. Now when you get home, here's what happens. Let's say he's trying to come back. Here's Earth. Now here's the conduit. It's open. And his sister, Isis, has been preparing to have a child. They're going to perform some ritual in the temple. Probably a sex ritual that will let his spirit, when he arrives, know like another song during sex, I suppose, or something to let him know that this is the vessel you want to carnate into. Given that they've been doing this a while, it's pretty easy to make sure that nobody else comes and messes with you. I'm sure random carnations, I guess. I'm just guessing this is the way. They've basically learned how to do something that happens naturally. Naturally, our souls get sucked into this river and we go wherever, and it has something to do with our DNA, is why we keep coming back here. To take control of it, you can escape to other worlds that are very beautiful and that aren't connected to you, but you have to remember how to do it. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at Stargate technology, but they don't want you to know about it, so they're going to fill your mind with William Henrys and ancient aliens and people who are going to go after this idea that you have to have nuts and bolts vessel. Let me tell you something. This means right here that we are born with interstellar capabilities. Already, we don't need technology and plastic and nuclear reactions for heavy things. We have plenty of heavy things that are already opening conduits and portals for other things we just hadn't understood yet. Some extraterrestrial technology came here and built this thing and taught it to us, and we're lucky enough to have it. Yet only the greed in man is causing the rich and powerful to be able to do this. But you can rest assured they have control over this. Doesn't mean they get to live forever. They have to go through the same portal everybody does. I think there's this fine line between fantasy, where you get ancient aliens, William Henrys, and they're people stuck on the idea that they're just going to fly here in these little planes, and they don't even need to go that great distance because they open wormholes. This is a technology that creates reactions and causes problems and side effects. Why wouldn't they just paddle across a naturally occurring flow by using high degree of understanding, but not really stepping outside the nature of a world, and not really abusing the world with this grid that existed in times. The wars and the technology of weapons gained by the misuse. You see, another problem is, once you learn how to open this conduit as a priest, you can also open this conduit just to communicate visions. And you get someone like Hitler, and the conduit's open, he's got mediums that bring in visual representations. They describe it, it's written down. Scientists look at it and figure out to some degree what it is, and then they narrow their focus toward that, and next thing you know, you have massive rises in technology, and then more attempts to push this. Then you have to ask yourself, what is the most likely vessel and purpose for a vessel? A physical nuts and bolts vessel. And would it even be nuts and bolts? I don't think it would. I find very interesting the Baltic Sea object. I would look at something like something we just would not understand how in the heck it could move anything, because we're expecting that it would move us. We're going to pack our bags, load up in this spaceship, and fly across the world, and that's not the way you send a new colony somewhere. Sure, you have to at some point physically get your DNA to this other point. Now, there's going to be consequences if the DNA teleportation code can imprint DNA onto random life on this planet. Sure, you could that's probably a long-term investment, though. It seems from their technology, they don't just send the DNA code, though. They send the essence of the spirit, the mind of the person. So, would you really want to send your mind and your code to a planet that hasn't evolved to the point where the vessel that you become is going to have to go through millions of years of evolution? I mean, you're really digressing if you do that. So, I mean, the reality is that, yes, with this kind of technology, you'd have to have a technology, but I would say, judging from the technology I see that they left here, is not nuts and bolts. I mean, it's nuts and bolts, but they're not made out of steel. They're made out of stone and natural occurring things, and their purpose seems to be shaping gravity and time and focusing in it, it's an antenna, a lens, and then using it as a conduit for a great many things to bring people to bring technology. And we know today that if we travel to another world physically, let's say here's our spaceship. Do I have a flying saucer? Let's call this my flying saucer. So if we, So if we have this UFO here, we have this flying saucer here, and it flies freaking all the way to Sirius, or from Sirius to Earth. It could take an incredible amount of time. Even what people theorize that you could physically open up one of these wormholes. I think that there is some evidence that happens, but in the Maya Codex, it's pretty interesting how it's kind of like it doesn't happen. It's kind of like a looking glass, moreover. While yes, you can go there and interact with them, you're also still doing it from your own observation point. You're both. It's weird. It's really hard to understand. It's like split light. It's like you're in two different places at one time. While you may be at home experiencing this on some kind of visual system, you have real world effects there, if that makes sense. It's like astral traveling, but being able to reach out and grab something and smell it and bite it and eat it. It seems so. I cannot quite tell yet if they were talking about sending honeybees and corn physically through an opening. That wouldn't surprise me. But the technology I would expect to look like what we already have doing it on Earth. Things that are made to be heavy. So the spaceship I would expect to be something, instead of creating some kind of magical reaction using plutonium and nasty things that really destroy you and only could be done by an industrial style civilization, which that's a great filter that should destroy most of them. And it's going to be the few survivors that realize that's an unsustainable method and have to adapt their technology and convert it. Not only that, instead of creating reactions to make heavy shit, use already heavy shit and grab some heavier shit. And just consider it from an observation perspective of the entirety of the mythology where they're describing this is interstellar reincarnation resurrection technology. It allows you to move yourself, memories, and code to the world on the other side of the conduit during the alignment time. To understand something like that, if we were to assume it was true, let's patronize the entirety of it from this observation perspective. Especially when we start to see hints that the alignment points to actual forces connecting. So there is a conduit. We know for a fact it's there during that time. So they found that needle in the haystack of when to do this. Then you would realize if the alignment is the conduit, you're talking about the weight of it all, the gravity of this subject, heaviness. I would suppose then, if you were a human trying to go to the great mystery schools, which is a Greek philosopher, geometric expert, going and measuring these devices, figuring out what these measurements mean to the best they can in developing mathematics and science we have today. It does look as if they just tried to figure it out to the best as they can, and they're still trying to do this. All of them say it wasn't human technology. If this was truly an interstellar reincarnation resurrection technology that utilizes the gravity weights of heavy things when aligned, and that weight is at a peak between those bodies, who can then move. I can't imagine all this Gaia TV Stargate stuff to send things physically through them if these masters must die in order to travel through this gate. It seems like a consequence price that everyone has to pay to become an interstellar traveler. Now, and if I was to just outside of all of this, imagine a civilization that had mastered what gravity, heaviness was, to such a point where they realized this is how a natural flow of current and tides through this life that we live incarnating, then in order to harness the power of this, they would have to become complete masters of none other than heaviness. Things that either create reactions that cause space to get heavy because you're containing an explosion or something, or perhaps by the nature of the heaviness that already exists out there, conduits open all the time that could be used like a phone line, the natural conduit between heavy objects. And if then I was to say, reviewing extraterrestrial technology that I wouldn't recognize as anything related to what it would be, I mean, especially in ruins where it appears to be human but it's too big, one thing I can guarantee is the temple builders of the global monolithic construction had advanced tools, and they were masters of weight and heaviness, clearly. Their mastery in weight and heaviness and ability to just seem to levitate things over mountain ranges that we still can't match, not even close. And for what? A tomb? A temple? And then we discount the legends of these being actual connections by some way, shape, or form. Those that do go off into a Disney cartoon singing to dancing pottery and silverware while feeding the birds on Gaia TV now. You got Billy Carson, you got David Wilcock, Emery Smith, and Corey Good. If you believe any of those people, you're out of your mind. If you want to get to the brass tacks of proof of extraterrestrials, it's pretty simple. You go to the mystery schools, you start measuring, and you figure out for yourself what these mathematical things. A lot of people are ahead of you, but it's called pseudoscience today. Masters of heaviness and gravity. You'd think that their technology might be the heaviest objects around. And in the way they construct their equipment is going to be something we would marvel over for the entirety, just looking at it with awe. And all civilizations say they were gods that came from the stars, brought this here, taught it to man. If there was a war among them between common and a royal, they left it here. Now we've tried to recover it with the greed of man and the slavery in order to continue this process. Because how else do you get civilization to put forward so much effort as to the most intense, demanding creation of their entire history would be a tomb. More important than food on the table, more important than anything. You can do this through slavery, and you'd have to if you want to keep this a secret in secret societies and divide religions that seem somewhat mundane compared to being able to do this. Once you understand the numbers and the information about this, the story of Jesus, it becomes clear that Jesus was from the same star system. Clearly different personalities than we read about, but the Christ came from the two-bow or nearer double helix star system. Lord of the Star Sirius was Surat Najm 5349.9 in the Quran, and you have similar astronomy in the story of Jesus' birth, three magi east of the Star of Bethlehem. So, I think this should really open the door, so to speak, for conversation about the reality behind what can be sent through, how life comes. Now, I'm going to continue on. A little bit injured. My back went out for about 3 days. Not editing too well. But I'm going to talk about some of the legends about the lizard people in the egg and the moon, because I think this is also recognizable to the same type of technology we're dealing with by looking at how kind of natural. I mean, we're even debating, rather, we have mounds that just all of a sudden we realize they're pyramids. We've thought all this stuff was natural, and it's been hidden from us because these mounds were documented by surveyors and geologists throughout America while they were being destroyed, and things hidden by the Smithsonian. The same secret societies that infiltrated our government, and now they want to keep this information to themselves. The more it gets out from the common man, the more they use a magic wand that's meant to distract you with the right hand. Look over here. Or the left hand pulls a slide. Now, that's made out of Hollywood and their capital of illusion, where they praise each other for, well, Grammys, etc., as royals and kings. You can clearly see the separation. They definitely fill your mind with a bunch of Stargate movies and a bunch of things that makes this kind of stuff seem make-believe. Technology always seems like magic if you don't understand how it works. Imagine a king from 5,000 years ago seeing a cell phone. Come on. This is kind of like that, but the thing is as soon as they understand it, they realize, oh, so it is sorcery, but it's science. Here we have the same thing. It's not incredibly difficult to start to develop an understanding of what the Greek philosophers and mathematicians created for our science that we use today to completely smear the idea of where they learned it. The best in the world learned it by measuring these things. And I think they understood. I mean, we look at Leonardo da Vinci and his painting, and he clearly understood the relation to the Christ. So, let's finish this up. So, if I was then to say, by what I've learned from my mystery school teachings, measuring and learning these things after a career of building temples of the modern time, you can't do it with machines. You certainly aren't going to be able to rig up some way with horses to do it. If we see the lines and we see the saw marks, then of course we can identify how it's done. And we do with the temples. They can't be done without modern technology, but the lifting and the moving and the timing, according to Egyptology, we cannot do that. So, somewhere between having a diamond and impregnated blade, but with some kind of driving force to spin it, and using water the same way we know they cut them that way. But how they moved them, they say sound, doesn't surprise me, because what were they building? Big frickin' acoustic machines that were gravity machines that stars. They're talking about heaviness, pulling open a conduit, using sound and tone and song to send essence and genetic code through the conduit. And that's exactly what they do with this little phantom DNA experiment. Except minus the star and the gravity element. This is like on steroids. So, I would think that the first, when you have to physically colonize the star, and I'm going to have a vessel that's a sphere. And you start to recognize this vessel. Of course, this vessel would be also built that once it gets there, we can use it as something more to have, so what you're looking at with the moon is a pyramid in the sky. It's the key to unlocking this door for us. It helps this whole process. So now we have the moon. Well, it's closer to Earth, but you know what I'm saying. In this whole scheme of things, to focus. Now, it's not always part of the alignment, but if you can get a total eclipse during this thing, I mean, it really, really changes the quality according to these ancient people. The Mayans specifically liked it because they believed that they were pretty much just trying to get information from the sun that the sun had in it. They weren't really trying to cross the stars in, some of their rituals. So this is, total eclipses were a very big thing. But they were also able to use them as illusions because of the information they got from them. Of all the ideas and theories about how aliens came here, the Anunnaki, or all of these ancient stories, is going to be that the moon was an egg. And it's funny, on the same continent, in the same area, we get these tribal people who, in their traditions, have intact this idea that the moon showed up here and was full of reptilian beings. Alright. Well, first of all, what you have to understand is the same people who would do this kind of naturalesque or whatever you'd call it, technology, would obviously have something that would look like the moon. We've been saying it's natural for so long. Shit, we call their pyramids natural for so long, and then we realize, oh wow. And it starts with little hints that it's not real or that it's not natural. There's too many things about it that look like a pyramid, then we dig it up. Oh, it's a pyramid. Well, the moon has had that process. The size, the ratios, all these weird things. And then you have, before you know it, you find out consistencies across the board. Cultures say, oh, the moon wasn't here before. There was a time before the moon, a time before rain. How could humans remember a time before the moon? But it very well could be. In fact, if we did open up a door and just walk through, we'd have to wear a spacesuit. And we may come here and explore, but we're not going to just open up the door and send our whole family and go live and colonize there. Why would we? But in order to do that, let's say we do, then you go there and you go build things wearing those spacesuits. If you had that technology to open up Stargate, you have AI and robots. You send the robots through, they build your shit. Then you go there and wear spacesuits every time you go outside and live in some kind of thing. That's totally not going to be how it works. We already know this. If you watch Discovery Science, we'll see what we're proposing already with genetic alteration that starts to look something like what the people write on the walls. Like these gods have mastery over, they can have a lion-headed dragon or whatever they want. It starts to make sense then. What you do is you have an egg, and it's not going to go to waste. You're going to leave it in a position that's going to change the environment, which will encourage life to move in the next number of years. It'll potentially also affect the planet in a way as to be terraforming. Now, the planet's already alive, but it's terraforming. Now, we don't know exactly when the moon came here, but particular life forms, I would use robotic AIs. But if you get a little more technical than that, there's a good chance that if there are types of life forms, well, in fact, we already know there's types of life forms that can survive. It makes amazing sense when we hear the tribals from history say that the beings that were in the egg were reptilian, because if there were living beings that were sent here first to work for us, kind of like biological robots, or something that was already naturally a life form that works really well for us, slaves, maybe we hire their culture because of their residuance. Say, okay, or maybe these are harvested and genetically modified. Instead of building a robotic body, you genetically modify the longest living reptile with the most resilient ability. Well, maybe there are reptiles animals or living kind of reptilian creatures that are found on asteroids, right? We don't know this, but there's a lot of these things, and who knows if there's a light. I'm just giving an idea of what may not need to be a robotic AI. I would expect this thing to be full of robots, like the image that shows the moon is hollow with the cities inside it made out of our idea of what cities would look like. Instead of thinking that it's like a honeycomb beehive somewhere inside there, and the only technology that you're going to see is going to look like what you see on Earth as ruins, except for maybe what other cultures might have dropped on there or used or whatever. But interesting that it's an egg full of reptilian beings that got here before man, blah, 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 blah. That would make the perfect biological employee or slave, if you will. Biological friend, like my cat. Let's say my cat was some reptilian thing that can go in and dig a hole, and then this volcano that blasts so much, these things evolve to go in space and make it to the closest moon, and they colonize that, and so on and so forth. Over millions of years, they're very resilient, can handle weird things. They can burrow down into. I take their DNA, and I get to a point where I learn how to do the same thing that Maya did with corn, and I create a subservient friend like my cat, my dog. It's not necessarily a slave, he's my good buddy. I have a whole race of cat, dog, reptilian reptiles that are smart and genius. Not too genius, taking over the world. I put them all in this thing because they are way more resilient and they can live way longer. And they'll get to the orbiting position. Once they get there, they will use whatever their technology is to do what I need them to do, which would probably be get onto the planet. These tribals are correct, and it seems to be so. In my opinion, it's exactly so. Probably a biological thing that was able to handle multiple environments. Therefore, it's good to send it ahead of the real method of teleportation and transportation, which is life after death and reincarnation and control of it, riding that boat. So you send your moon, your egg, rather you send it through the space, seems to be how it needs to be done. One of the reasons for making it huge and full of a whole bunch, like an army, and sending it over there with supplies, army that are going to get here, and then they're going to come down on the surface. If they come over here and they do the genetic work, they can pull the genetic code. The best way would be bringing samples and send it back through the conduit. And their job, I'd call them the Ajiji. Probably, if you're looking Sumerian, the Ajiji were the ones that come here first and made man. That's for the Sumerians. Now you're starting to see where this technology and a review of technology would line up with just the idea of the Ajiji came here first, and they were reptilians who built man, and then all of a sudden these Anunnaki gods came here that are man, but they're demigod. You look at their technology, and then we get this little clue from some tribals that the moon is what brought the reptilians, and they were much older than the Anunnaki. You're talking about the Ajiji brought here in an egg that is also a piece of technology that we use as a pyramid in the sky. It's probably not going to be shaped like this. It's probably going to be a sphere, because a sphere is going to be a good. This gravity nodal point. I mean, this is great. So you're not wasting anything. You're probably influencing the tides with your measurement, doing what you need to do with the ratio of this, whatever planet you're on, versus the size of their sun. You want to get effects. The thing in between, the size of it, and where it tugs and when it aligns with things, is going to have massive effects. And this could fix or damage a world. This is about this is a terraforming spacecraft. You're not going to be looking for a flying saucer vessel. Though they exist, I'm probably thinking somewhere between more technological AI computers that may look more biological, or a mixture between the two, like these gray things, maybe a Borg kind of idea. They may not be. Either way, these things are going to be engineered for space travel and working to do the primary work. Elon Musk knows this, and he claims he has no interest in aliens. That's bullshit. He's creating the mind that's to be used for the aliens he's going to send out to other worlds to do the work so that we can go there. Those are going to be the aliens we're probably seeing all the time. Now, the Anunnaki got here through this system by being born into. Now, you look at William Bramley's Gods of Eden, he was theorizing the same thing. But the Anunnaki, he theorizes they came here physically after the AGG, and it's possible they could have sent some leaders in some kind of technological thing. And they come here the way they are. It doesn't make sense why they would, though. They wouldn't likely be able to, unless they were from an extremely similar planet, or they were from here before. Still, it shouldn't work. It should be like we would do it today, where we need to get samples of life from the planet to see what animals have adapted perfect to it, so that when we go there, we can live there perfectly. So, again, we know there's problems with the Anunnaki story. I think this falls more in the place of more resilient beings could be used to come here, put a base on Mars, a base here, and start building, taking genetic code, build the first temples. You may send people that will wear spacesuits to help control the first Ijiji. And so that would make sense why we have some rulers here that did complain about the heat and so on and so forth. And according to Zecharia Sitchin, the DNA that was used to make the humans was the DNA from the enemies of their North-South World War. And so the tribulations they face is now when their enemies reincarnate, they have to go into us, our human. Where we are the Anunnaki who are imprisoned. We have fallen, like fallen angels. We were at a state as we were like high in the heavens. And this is kind of, if you look at the symbolism of theology and into Anunnaki ideas, or William Bramley's ideas of things, he finds it really interesting. He goes about DNA as this idea of your essence, and so you come here and you splice your DNA with monkeys, perfect primate on this world, and then guess what? The consequence isn't that you just get smart monkeys as slaves. The consequence is that you can now be born into one of those monkeys, depending on your close ties to that genetic code. If it was your brother or sister, you could be in trouble. Now, you're probably going to continue to fall into natural code that's closest to you, reincarnate in your own world. Unless there's a war in which they've been keeping track of enemy genetic code and then killing off all of their bloodlines so they don't exist anymore, then they can come over here and make slave race while putting their... I don't know how to explain it. Putting their code into certain bloodlines of this race that they call royal will always have rulership over this world. So, the William Bramley and Zecharia Sitchin story is that they use the genetic code of their enemies mostly for the majority of the primate experiment. once perfected, they created a hybrid race using their own genetic code and ensure that that hybrid race is taught as royal and removed. That hybrid race, when they left and their colonies here, something I think happened to them. Because I don't think they did return. Unless time is so different that it's going to be. And that seems to be the case too, but they left. Now we're here with the head monkeys in charge. Vatican, temple built, and then so the head monkeys decide they're going to go around the world, running the world that belongs to them. They're going to inscribe and write their stories and somewhat indirectly claim credit, in some cases claim full credit for the technology that they didn't build. They're going to learn to build great technology, but it was taught to them by these entities, and some of it may have been built by these entities, and we talk about the difference between places where they said gods built it and the places where they said man was taught by angels to how to build the temple. So I mean, it just really takes a lot of close review. And if you just happen to be most likely a reincarnated version of one of these frickin' prisoners, then I think how this system works becomes somewhat natural. This depends on how much you start to understand about it. So that's what I have to say about it.